I can think of few people better to discuss all of this with than Senator Bernie Sanders, who joins me now. He's the author of the new book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism. I don't know how you found the time to write a book amidst everything going on that touches on so many issues impacting all of us. And we're going to get to that. Start with a few items in this week. There were new revelations, Senator, this week about Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas and his financial relationship with billionaire Harlan Crow. And just this morning, there's a new reporting about some inaccuracies on his financial disclosure forms. Your colleague, Thomas, for potential violations. Do you back Senator Whitehouse's call?
Well, I think Senator Whitehouse is on the right track. The Supreme Court does not have to go along with the same person and other judges do. And it's time we ended that leniency for the Supreme Court. Some of what we're reading about in terms of Judge Thomas is really quite outrageous, and I think it needs to be investigated.
By the Department of Justice. A number of colleagues of yours, House and in the Senate too, have said he should be impeached. Do you think that if wrongdoing is found, he should be impeached?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do before you impeach somebody is investigate the situation. And I think that is what the Department of Justice should be doing.
And really through her career on issues related to the judiciary is Senator Dianne Feinstein, one of your longtime colleagues. Representative Ro Khanna called for her to resign because her medical absence is keeping Democrats from confirming judges. No doubt a big priority for all of you. But do you think she should resign?
In several weeks, the hope is that she will be back as soon as possible. The decision about whether somebody should resign rests on that individual themselves. I don't think she should be forced out. She should take into consideration her health situation and when she's going to be back.
It's a lot going on with that committee now, which has oversight over the FDA. And right now, approval for the abortion pill could be revoked. It's really hanging in the balance. Should courts have the ability, rule, to take a drug away from millions of people, like this, but also others?
The fundamental attack on rights. It is beyond comprehension that in the year 2023, you have people who think that it should not be women who control their own bodies, but government. And this is just another example of that. And we have got to fight as hard as their lives and not some right-wing politician.
You wrote in an op-ed back in October, Senator Sanders, last year, that Democrats should focus only on abortion in the midterms. That's a mistake. It proved to be quite a winning issue. In fact, I've been at this a while, too. Did you underestimate the power of this issue and the power of it had in motivating voters?
No, Jen, what I said is that abortion should be front and center. The right of women to control their own lives is a fundamental issue, but it cannot be the only issue. And if you're reading about workers' rights, started talking about Social Security and preserving Medicare and health care. So, no, I don't think I was wrong. Bottom line is, of course, we have to continue the fight for rights and abortion rights. But you cannot ignore the reality that 60% of the paycheck, we have massive and wealth inequality. People can't afford child care. They can't afford health care. And they are struggling. You cannot ignore those issues.
All of them are important, you're saying. You need to focus on all of them. We just got new details, Senator, about Alabama at a teenagers' party. A lot of details are still coming out. You yourself, I think, and you've talked about this a fair amount, have evolved on the issues of guns. You voted against a bill in 1993 that established national background checks and for a bill in 2005 that protected all of the measures in recent years. As gun reform advocates are looking to try to move people to actually do something, what can they learn from you about your own evolution on this issue, about how to approach it?
Well, let's be clear, Jen. Let us be clear. 1988, when I ran for Congress the first time, All right. And I come from a lot of people, hunters here, and do target practice, etc. But where we are right now, what the world has seen horrifically, unspeakably, in the last 20 plus years are these terrible, terrible mass shootings in schools and elsewhere in large numbers. That we need at least common sense gun safety legislation. That means people who should not own guns for a variety of reasons based on their background not have that. We need universal background checks, in my view, for these automatic weapons designed to kill people rapidly. These are military weapons. These are not weapons that should be in our civil society.
President Trump has appealed to working class voters, as have you, over the course of your...
Working class voters, I appeal to this in general, and all of the issues that we
certainly
talk
do.
about.
You certainly do, Senator. I have a point here. Let me get to it. In a recent CNN poll, 58% of Republicans without a four-year degree said nominating Trump again would give the party its best chance of winning in issues that are important to a range of workers, range of Americans in the working class. Are Democrats underestimating Trump? Is that something you're concerned about as you're watching?
Of course they're underestimating Trump. But the issue that we should ask ourselves is, how does it happen when you have a pathological working class people with so much working class support? And the reason is that for too many years, the Democratic leadership has turned its back on working people. So you have minimum wage, which remains at $7.25 an hour. That makes sense. Guarantee health care to all people is right. Talking to you 50 miles away from the Canadian border. They spend one half as much as we do per capita. You guarantee health care to all people. We pay the highest prices in the world for drugs. We have corporations who are making it harder for workers to join. Do you think we're paying attention to the working class in this country? Billionaires are doing phenomenally well. It's time we stood up with work for working people and fought for a government and a society that work for us. And when you do that, I think people will see the fraudulent nature of somebody like Donald Trump.
Plans to run for re-election, but he is yet prepared to announce. You have said you're going to support President Biden, but are there places, and maybe you touched on some of them just now, where you've been frustrated that his administration has gone far enough at this point?
Of course they have. Look, why in some cases we're 10 times more for prescription drugs as do the people of other nations. Why? And that has to do with the power of the pharmaceutical industry, the fact that they have 1,700 paid lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Has the president been strong on American people while you're enjoying record profits? No, he is not. We need to raise the minimum wage, in my view, to at least $17 an hour so that working people, low-income people, get a shake. Have we heard enough about that? No, we have not. We need do we protect Social Security funds? The Republicans want it. We have to expand it. Half of the elderly people in this country have nothing in the bank as they face retirement. I haven't heard the president talking about that as much as he should. And bottom line, and this is what the book was about that you mentioned earlier, a society. And I know that is not comfortable for people to hear, but it's important that we discuss this issue. We have more income and wealth inequality today than we've ever had. We have more concentration of ownership than we have ever had. We have a corrupt political. Those are some of the issues we need to, on corporate media, we need to discuss in the United States Congress.
The title of your book, It's Okay to Be Angry About Capitalism, really did sit with me. It's a memorable book title, Senator. Of all the things voters are angry at, even Clarence Thomas's relationship with a billionaire, I know how you feel about billionaires. Why should capitalism be at the top of that list? Why was that important to be in the title of that book?
Jen, important. Abortion is a huge issue. Social justice is a huge issue about it, and Congress forgets about it. They're chatting today. Do you know that there are tens and tens of millions of Americans who cannot afford health care, who are scared to death that if their kid or they get sick, they don't know what's going to happen? There are people working for starvation to send their kids to decent child, can't even find a slot. Those are issues of enormous consequence we don't talk about. You tell me, you got 3 people up today who own more wealth than the bottom half of American society. It works for all of us or just a few. Is that an issue worth discussing?
We're talking about it now, Senator, so I'm happy to have you on. I wanted to ask you about President, I did want to ask you, sir, about President Biden's nomination of Julie Su for the Labor Department Secretary.
Right, but I wanted to talk, and I love to talk about income and wealth inequality. Let's talk about concentration of ownership. Let's talk about corporate ownership of the media. Do you think that those are issues worth discussing?
Well, Senator, I have you on today. We're having comment about all of these issues. I did want to ask you about this because you are chairman of this committee. It is important to have reporting that suggests holdouts are Senator Manchin and Senator Sinema. First of all, is that true? And second, what are you saying to them to get them on board? What's the case you're making for her?
Well, look, we have Manchin and Sinema who torpedoed Build Back America. You having worked for President Biden, it was a mental piece of legislation which I thought was transformative. And you have 2 corporate Democrats who refuse to support that very important Biden initiative. We all worked very, very hard on. Once again, I think what you have as an issue is what else they're going to have to decide. Julie Su is now being attacked, big ads all over the country, because she stands up for working people. She believes in apprenticeship programs. She believes in raising wage. She's opposed vigorously to the exploitation of children. Become our Secretary of Labor. Corporates don't want her. And we will see how members of the Democratic caucus vote on that. I think we got to have unanimous support for her on the committee. But as you indicate, it comes down to some of our corporate Democrats in the...
Be sure to check out the senator's new book.